One of the most common things I hear people say to me is they don't feel like they're good enough. Whether that's for a spouse, a romantic partner, family, friends, bosses, whoever it is in their life. It's a really common way to feel, and it's a really hard way to feel. So thanks for joining us for this video, and hopefully something in here will help you. Any stories shared in this podcast have had names and details changed for the confidentiality of clients. Any resemblance to someone real is coincidental. Hello everybody, thank you for joining us for today's video. Today we are going to talk about one of the most common reasons people seek out some kind of self-help or some kind of therapy, and that is feeling like you're not good enough. I think we talked about this before, but I think many therapists would agree that that's like quickly what comes to the surface with a lot of people who come in seeking treatment or anything like that.
Yeah, I think so too. Lots of times people are either seeking treatment or seeking self-help kind of stuff because they know that they don't feel good. And they see evidence of that in their lives, in the way they interact with people and different problems they have and all kinds of things. But as they start to do some of their own work and start to dig down to what's under that, this is often one of the things that bubbles to the surface. Sometimes people are aware that this is it, and sometimes they're not, but it's a super common issue that people discover.
So when folks end up showing up in your office, I feel like the majority of the experience is that they may not necessarily put their thumb on why it is. There's lots of environmental stressors. But as you meet with them and you start to work through, what do you guys normally start to see? Like, how do you start to piece this apart? What do you start to discover that lots of folks, including ourselves, may have in common?
So first of all, I would say, and you were talking about this a little bit earlier, I don't know that everybody always comes in and straight up says, hey, the problem is I think that I'm not good enough. Sometimes people can come in and verbalize that straight out the gates. But for the most part, people will notice symptoms of depression or anxiety or something along those lines. And when we dig down, they'll notice that there's just like this feeling that sits somewhere in their body that's really uncomfortable. And they've tried to do lots of things to like get rid of it or make it better or work through it or whatever. And it's more of this feeling. And I think the feeling differs a little from person to person. Some people tell me it sits in their chest, and some people say it sits in their stomach. But there is some kind of feeling that I feel like is common among people.
Yeah. I always compare it to like a tree, right? And that feeling is the leaves and the branches, right? This is the part we see of the tree. That's the part we experience of a tree. But it comes from some kind of root, right? It comes from something deeper inside, I guess. It's not necessarily a feeling, but something that we believe about ourselves or believe about the world, and it manifests a little bit different for everybody, whether it's anxiety or depression, but ultimately it's unhelpful, and a lot of times that root is this feeling of not being good enough for your family, your friends, anybody, whatever.
Yeah. One of the other things that I think is really interesting about this feeling, we try to put words on it, and often the words do sound something like, I'm not good enough. I don't measure up in some way, right? And everybody maybe has their own phrasing for that. But one of the things that I find really interesting about this is just how difficult it is for people to challenge, right? I don't know how often we walk around the world and go, well, they're not good enough, and they're not good enough, and they're not good enough. Most people don't do that. But then when we feel that way and we try to challenge it just a little bit, there's like this big pushback. It's like, no, this is just the truth about me.
Well, as you talk about that, it reminds me of an experience that I will share. But I think what ends up happening is you have this feeling, and the reality is it's often external factors that give us that feeling that then influences the choices that we make and how we move throughout our life. And then we don't realize that those choices are being hindered by the feelings and beliefs that we have. So I'll give you an example. I was talking to a family member, this was several years ago, and the current place that they were working was taking a toll on them, both like physically and mentally and all these things. And so one of the things that I suggested was that they go to like a tech college and get the certification or the licensing for being a medical assistant, because I thought that they would be really good at it. And the person responded and said something to the effect of, oh, I'm not smart enough to go to school, right? So there's that belief. I mean, obviously the feeling is that I'm unintelligent and I'm dumb. And I was like, what an oxymoron statement. Like you go to school to get smart. You go to school because you're not smart. You go get training, whether it's a college or whatever. And I'm like, but now this person has just kind of ruled out that I'm not intelligent enough to go to school. And I'm like, it's backwards.
Yeah, that's kind of the point.
Yeah, you know.
That's the point.
And
That's a
so
better one.
it's interesting because a lot of things will happen that make us have these feelings or these beliefs about ourselves that we may not be aware of until it's uncomfortable. And then we either self-help it, or we go to treatment, or we talk to our doctor. And that's where kind of like the splitting starts to take place, you know, and you have to start to try and tease some of this stuff out. And that's where a lot of this I'm not good enough starts to manifest, at least in my awareness.
Yeah. I think that, you know, for people maybe listening to this, it would be really helpful for them to just stop and kind of dig deep and analyze. Is there some kind of feeling inside of you like this that says you are not good enough? And if so, what do you do with it in your present life? Do you do things like avoid going to school because you just feel like, well, I'm not good enough, and so I'm not even going to try that? Do you try to work yourself out of that position? You know, a lot of times people who have issues with working too much, that is part of the working too much. I don't feel good enough, and so now I got to prove myself all the time, right? So many of these things manifest in this way. And so I think like the first thing to do, figure out, is this something that comes up for you, and how are you responding to it right now? I don't think you have to go to therapy to figure that out. I think this is something that you can just do on your own time and see how this surfaces. Every person has at least a little bit of this. And whether that's like the prominent belief that they have inside or not, that's a different story. But for a lot of us, it is.
Yeah. And it's too big a thing and too varied per person for us to like give you the answer. Like, well, here's how you stop feeling that way. But yeah, I think what you can do is, how is this manifesting in my life? How is this showing up? Is it stopping me from going to school because I'm not smart enough to go learn new things? Or first, and then kind of maybe even you can piece together, well, where'd you learn that? How'd you learn that about yourself? Where'd you get that? And I think those are two parts that you can probably do by yourself that maybe go a long way for some people. And if you feel like you need a little more, that's when it might be time to seek out some kind of self-help project or therapeutic intervention.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right, well, hopefully this has been helpful, and if you enjoyed it, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.
Thanks.
Bye.
If you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. We've got other videos for you to check out and more exciting things coming soon, so thank you.